Blood of the Cybermen is the second out of the 5 Doctor Who adventure games, released in June of 2010, just as Series 5 of the TV show finished airing. In this video, we're going to be looking at a handful of interesting and entertaining glitches that can be performed in this game. Not to be confused with hacking the game, these glitches can be performed without touching the files at all, which means you, the viewer, can easily go and replicate them yourself if you're lucky enough to still have access to a copy of the game. Not the easiest things to get a hold of anymore, unfortunately. Going through the game chronologically, the first noteworthy glitch is a way to get out of bounds, outside the intended playable area, and into the backstage, so to speak. This can be done in the first area of the game, where you need to rescue an injured Arctic researcher named Chisholm from dying of cold exposure by helping him back to the TARDIS. You need to climb around this ice cavern ahead of him and create pathways easy enough for him to handle with his sprained ankle. Some say this breach in the boundaries of existence is caused by Chisholm's suffering, his sprained ankle hampering his ability to hold together the world around him, as if the very fabric of reality were inexorably linked to Chisholm's well-being, and where he is weakened, so too are the laws of physics. Some religions hold the belief that if this man were ever to die one day, as unlikely as that is, the natural foundations upon which the universe rests, such as gravity or the constant speed of light, would quickly break down and decay. The gameplay all takes place on these raised platforms of ice, with invisible walls to keep you from falling off, except for one special area where falling off is an environmental hazard. The freezing water at the bottom is only meant to be background scenery, which is why things get really weird if you actually try walking around down there, which is exactly what we'll be doing. Here is how to get out of bounds. Approaching this minor drop will trigger an animation for the Doctor to climb down, and once you're down on this lower level, there is an invisible wall stopping you from walking off. But what the developers didn't account for is how you can run off the edge at a sharp angle in a way that doesn't trigger the climb down animation, carrying you straight across the top of that invisible wall and down the other side. Now we're standing magically on top of the surface of the water, out of bounds. Here, the rules of the game world don't really apply, because this place was never meant to hold up to being traversed or even looked at too closely. Some ground that appears solid will drop you into the void without warning, and many walls can be walked straight through. The environment that you see in the game world is not technically the same as what you walk on and interact with. It's an invisible copy of the world that overlaps with the visible version called collision. The collision is what stops you when you run into a wall in a video game, or keeps you supported so you don't fall through the floor into the void. Normally it matches up one-to-one with what you can see, but in an area like this, where you're only supposed to look at it from afar, the collision wasn't necessary to add. We're lucky there's any kind of floor to land on at all, really. Look at this deceptively simple way they added depth to the ice by having a textured surface underneath the translucent top layer. It's nicely done. If you step in the wrong spot and fall into the void, you can also glimpse some sets used in the cutscenes being stored underneath the ice caves. The area seen in the flashback in the opening cutscene is directly below, and below that is the TARDIS interior. You unfortunately can't fall down into the TARDIS from here because the game has a failsafe that puts you back on solid ground if you fall a certain distance. But on the bright side, that failsafe makes it a lot less painful feeling around the unreliable collision down here. If not for that failsafe, you'd have to restart the game every single time you accidentally fall off. Next, in Act 2, we have a sequence break. A sequence break is a kind of glitch where the game's intended progression of events are triggered in the wrong order. So to understand what this next glitch is doing, it's good to understand how it works normally first. At the beginning of Act 2, the Doctor gets the chance while exploring to examine these two vents that are going to be important in a moment. Interacting with them triggers some internal monologue telling you what they are, but the Doctor has no reason to tamper with it yet. Then, the Doctor gets attacked by this half-converted Cyberman, a shambling zombie-like drone which the game refers to as a cyber slave. Player control switches to Amy for this part, as it falls on her to rescue the Doctor, while he keeps the cyber slave distracted. When Amy interacts with either of the steam vents, she can use it as an impromptu trap for the Doctor to lure the cyberslave in front of, and once she opens the valve and successfully blasts the cyberslave with the pressurized steam, player controls are handed back over to the Doctor. The important takeaway for understanding this glitch is that if you try to interact with the steam vent before or after the set piece playing as the Doctor, you just examine it, but during the set piece, you actually use it. The way the game can tell is by whether you're playing as the Doctor or Amy when you try to interact with it, since it only switches to Amy for the part where you need to use it. Except not really, because later in the game, there are more sections where you play as Amy, and in one of them you can go back out to this area and interact with the steam vent again. See this? Amy thinks to herself, this might work if I can get the lumbering thing close enough to the vent. As far as this interaction point knows, that set piece from before is currently underway because it's Amy using it instead of the Doctor. If we head to the other vent with the dead cyberslave in front of it, it will check to see if they are currently in the path of the blast, which of course they still are, being dead and all, so the cutscene of the cyberslave dying is triggered again, and player control is switched back over to the Doctor again, effectively skipping ahead a short ways past the end of this Amy section. If you're going to try this glitch for yourself, make sure to set the trap for the cyberslave at the vent closer to the door they came out from. For whatever reason, the glitch triggers the cutscene when done at this vent, but not at the vent on the far side of the yard. Next, in Act 3, we have a stealth mode glitch. Stealth mode is the state that's activated whenever the player needs to sneak past enemies without being detected, signified by this danger indicator in the corner of the screen. With very rare exceptions, being in stealth mode is the only way that enemies can see you at all, so if you could ever get up close to them without being in stealth mode, you would essentially be invisible to them. The stealth section, which can be glitched, has you sneak past these cyberslaves to this elevator platform, and the platform itself is a safe zone which disables stealth if you step on it. However, and this is the root of the glitch, that safety is revoked if you get on it while the cyberslaves are currently after you. It won't disable stealth until the heat dies down. And once it does, stepping back off the platform means crossing the trigger and going back into stealth. However, if you get spotted and then position Amy to be standing on the platform with the Doctor standing off the platform, then as soon as the cyberslave loses interest, Amy's presence on the now safe platform will disable your stealth mode, and you, the Doctor, don't need to cross the trigger to reactivate stealth mode to get off the platform because you're already on the other side of that trigger. What this means is, you can now run around this area to your heart's content in complete safety, free to look around at the cyberslaves up close or stand in areas of the room which would normally be very tricky to reach. The last glitch we're going to look at in this video is an AI bug with the Cybermen's behavior. This is towards the end of the game, when you start seeing a few fully formed Cybermen instead of their zombified minions. There's this one which patrols back and forth on this platform of ice, which you need to pass when their back is turned to get onto these hanging walkways. The glitch is, if you sneak up behind the Cyberman and get so close as to be detected, then this happens. And if you thought that was bad, just wait until you see what happens if you go directly in front of them. So, questions about how and why these things can happen are a little bit beyond the scope of this video to answer. At some point I intend on making an AI analysis video for the Cybermen the way that I did for the Daleks last time, and if I figure out what's causing this bizarre behavior, then I'll explain it then. Suffice to say, the Cybermen in the adventure games are, let's say, lacking in polish. And it's probably for the best that you only encounter a couple of them, and very briefly at that, outside of cutscenes. Ironically, the nearly mindless cyberslaves are much more competent as game enemies than the Cybermen themselves are. So, that's not every single glitch in Blood of the Cybermen, but it's all the best ones, that I'm aware of at least. Hunting for entertaining glitches in these Doctor Who games is what kept me coming back for more when I was a kid. It wasn't the riveting gameplay or the compelling stories, it was the glitches. It taught me a lot about how video games work to peel them apart at the seams like this. It was a fascinating way to learn. These games don't really have much in the way of secrets or Easter eggs, but discovering new glitches definitely scratched that same itch. Sure, it's not a good thing for a game to have this many oversights, but for me at least, they're a big part of what gives them their charm.